The animal that has been sleeping for 3 years and is still alive. In 1846, a snail was collected from the Egyptian desert and shipped to the British Museum in London. The museum staff assumed it was dead. They glued it to a piece of cardboard, labeled it, and put it on display. It stayed there, perfectly still, for 4 years. And then one morning, a staff member noticed something strange. The shell had moved. There was a faint trail of slime on the cardboard beneath it. The snail was not dead. It had simply been asleep for 4 years. In the middle of a museum, glued to a card. They gave it a warm bath. They fed it some cabbage, and it crawled out of its shell and looked around, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. This is not a fairy tale. This is a documented scientific event, and it raises a question that quietly unravels everything we think we know about life, time, and survival. How does something stay alive without moving, without eating, without breathing? For years, the creature at the center of this story is the desert snail, scientifically known as Aramina desertorum. Native to the hot, dry deserts of Egypt and the surrounding regions, this small, unremarkable shell dweller has evolved one of the most extraordinary survival strategies in the natural world. It sleeps, not the way you sleep, not the way bears sleep through winter. Something far deeper, far stranger. A sleep so complete that the body almost stops existing. Scientists call it estivation, a state of dormancy triggered not by cold, as with traditional hibernation, but by heat and dryness. When the desert becomes too harsh to survive, the snail does something remarkable. It retreats deep into its shell, seals the opening with a hardened layer of dried mucus called an epiphragm, and simply stops. Its heartbeat drops to almost nothing. Its breathing slows to the absolute minimum required to stay alive. Its digestion halts entirely. Its metabolism falls to a fraction of normal. And it waits. Think about what this actually means. We tend to think of life as something constant, something that requires movement, fuel, effort. The heart must beat. The lungs must breathe. The body must consume. These are not suggestions. They are the conditions of existence. And yet here is a creature that suspends all of those conditions. Not permanently, not fatally, just paused. When a snail enters estivation, its metabolic processes slow dramatically, reducing energy requirements to the bare minimum. It produces a thin, hard seal across the opening of its shell, the epiphragm, which locks in moisture and keeps out the world. The shell becomes a sealed chamber, a tiny, self-contained waiting room. Inside, the snail's body is not fighting to survive. It is simply existing at the lowest possible frequency of life. Not dead, not fully alive. Something in between that we don't have a good word for. What makes the desert snail extraordinary is the duration. Most hibernating animals wake up after a season, a few months at most. Marmots sleep for up to 8 months. Bumblebee queens can hibernate for 9. The edible dormouse holds the mammal record at 11 months. But snails? In extreme conditions, they can remain in this suspended state for up to 3 years, 3 full years, without food, without water, without movement. And when conditions finally improve, when humidity rises, when the temperature softens, the seal dissolves and the snail emerges. Alive, unhurt, ready to continue as though no time has passed at all. Let us go back to that snail in the British Museum, because the details of this story are worth sitting with. In March of 1846, the snail, a specimen of Aramina desertorum, was collected from the Egyptian desert and sent to England. The museum staff, believing it to be a dead shell, glued it to a cardboard display card. They labeled it, they dated it, they moved on. For 4 years, the snail sat in a glass case inside one of the world's most famous museums. Thousands of people walked past it. Scientists examined it. Not one of them knew it was alive. Then in March of 1850, exactly 4 years later, a shell expert named William Baird noticed something unusual. The shell had shifted slightly from its glued position. Beneath it, the cardboard was faintly discolored, the trace of dried mucus left behind when the snail had briefly stirred and then retreated back into sleep. Baird recognized what he was looking at. He removed the snail from the card, placed it in warm water, and watched. The epiphragm dissolved. The shell opened, and the snail extended its eye stalks and looked around, calm, unhurried, alive, as if it had simply woken from a nap. It was fed cabbage. It ate. It was given a companion snail. It lived for 2 more years in a glass jar at the museum before finally dying of natural causes. This snail, later called Lazarus by those who told the story, had survived 4 years of stillness, glued to cardboard, in an English museum, far from its desert home, and emerged perfectly intact. There is something deeply philosophical about this story, if you let yourself feel it. We experience time as something that moves through us. Every hour changes us slightly. We age, we hunger, we tire, we think. Time is not something we can pause or escape. It presses forward whether we want it to or not, but the snail experiences time differently. For the desert snail, time during estivation is not experienced at all. There is no dreaming, no waiting, no awareness of the days or seasons passing outside the shell. The world could change entirely, and the snail would know nothing of it. In a way, the snail does not live through those 3 years. It skips them. It steps out of time and steps back in. This is what makes the British Museum story so quietly astonishing. That snail was collected in Egypt in 1846. The last moment it was consciously present in the world, feeling the desert heat, sensing the dry air, was some time before it was placed in that box and shipped to England. And the next moment it was consciously present was 1850, in a warm bath in London, surrounded by strangers. 4 years of history had passed. It knew none of it. The snail is the most dramatic example, but it is not alone in this ability to pause. The wood frog of North America survives winter by doing something even more extreme. It freezes solid. Ice forms inside its body. Its heart stops. Its brain goes dark. And when spring comes, it thaws, and the heart starts again. The Arctic ground squirrel reduces its heart rate from 300 beats per minute down to just 5 during hibernation. Its body temperature drops to just above freezing. It breathes once every few minutes. Dwarf lemurs of Madagascar, the only primates known to truly hibernate, can go up to 10 minutes without a single breath, their brain activity becoming almost completely undetectable. And in 1904, 40 desert snails were sealed in a tin box as part of a scientific experiment. 8 years later, in 1912, researchers opened the box. 10 of those snails were still alive. 8 years, in a sealed tin box, with no food, no water, no light, no world. Still alive. We spend so much of our lives afraid of stillness. We fill every quiet moment. We move, we consume, we produce, we connect. We treat rest as something to be minimized, something to feel guilty about, something that separates us from the ones who are truly living. We spend so much of our lives afraid of stillness. We fill every quiet moment. We move, we consume, we produce, we connect. We treat rest as something to be minimized, something to feel guilty about, something that separates us from the ones who are truly living. We spend so much of our lives afraid of stillness. We fill every quiet moment. We move, we consume, we produce, we connect. We treat rest as something to be minimized, something to feel guilty about, something that separates us from the ones who are truly living. There is something the snail knows that we don't. Something about waiting, about trusting that the right conditions will return, about sealing yourself off from a world that has become too harsh and simply enduring. 3 years of silence, 3 years of stillness, and still alive. Maybe the snail is not slow. Maybe it is just the only creature wise enough to know when to stop.